What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
You're not interested in art?
No.
Now look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have a conversation.
From Chicago, this is Filmspotting. I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar.
Director Emerald Fennell follows up her earlier provocations, Promising Young Woman and Saltburn, with one directed at lovers of literature, Wuthering Heights.
I like those air quotes you made there, Josh. Marya Gates will join us for that review, plus John Ford's Best Picture winning How Green Was My Valley. That and more ahead on Filmspotting. Welcome to Filmspotting. Later in the show, an 85th anniversary review of How Green Was My Valley, John Ford's Best Picture winning film. It's the 84th anniversary of it taking the Best Picture Oscar over Citizen Kane. Neither of those reasons are why we're talking about it, though, Josh.
How dare How Green Was My Valley do that? Steal that Oscar from Citizen Kane.
I know, but it's part of our Pantheon Project. Over the next 3 weeks, we will be talking about 3 films that are vying for that Valhalla, a place in the Filmspotting Pantheon. We nominated 9 films on our last show. How Green Was My Valley is the first one up, a blind spot for me. Also later, listeners weigh in, and boy, do they, on their favorite 90s movie soundtracks. We really struck a chord with this one, Josh.
We tapped that nostalgia well, is what we did.
Yes, indeed. A quick reminder, Filmspotting is now available as a video podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, whatever they say. You can watch the show on YouTube, youtube.com/filmspotting if you're not there already. For a link to video episodes, all of our episodes, you can go to filmspotting.net/episodes. We are so pleased to be joined now by Marya E. Gates. Marya, thank you. It's been a little bit, and we are eager to talk to you about Wuthering Heights, which we will get to in a moment, but also your book, which came out last year. We've been planning this to have you on, and how has that been? I know you were on tour.
You know, it's been ups and downs. It actually, I was thinking about this. It celebrates its 1-year pub anniversary on February 29th, which is the leap day. Therefore, does it actually celebrate, or do I have to celebrate every 4 years? I'm confused. You know, I went on a bit of a tour, and I had screenings at MoMA and Academy Museum, which was really cool, and Vidiots, and Miranda July told a sold-out audience that it was one of the best design books she'd ever seen, so that was really nice.
I meant, just for the record, I meant to hold it up here on the video, but I left it in
I totally forgot to bring it.
I left it in my office on campus.
Also, it's in another room.
I love to show it off. It makes me feel very learned in my office.
Yeah.
So.
And in December, it got listed on Sight and Sound's 10 best film books of the year. So that was unexpected and a really nice sort of capper for the year. So I've heard really good things. It's for sale in a lot of random places too. Someone was at the Berlin Film Festival and went to a bookstore in Berlin, and it was there next to all these other really big Andre Bazin and stuff. So I feel, that feels good.
Cinema Her Way, visionary female directors. And I want to make sure I nail it here. Visionary female directors in their own words. You did talk to these visionary female
19
directors.
Women.
19 women. You interviewed them. Allison Anders, Jane Campion, a favorite here on Filmspotting, Marielle Heller, Julie Dash. You talked
Mira
to
Nair,
Karen Kusama. Mira Nair.
Mayor of New York.
The mother of the mayor of New York, which I did just learn for the first time about 3 weeks ago. That was interesting new information.
She tells a little story about him in my interview with her, if anyone is interested.
Oh, there's a tease, Marya.
Yeah, kind
nice
of a post.
Work. I mean,
it's a post 9/11 sort of what it was like to be a teenager in New York at that time. It's kind of a bittersweet story, but it's good.
I just want to recommend the book as well, Marya. I mean, it's not only full of those great interviews, but it's gorgeous. It looks amazing. And it prompted, I know we had hoped to talk about it. We didn't get a chance to, but I did end up watching Love and Basketball because that's what we had discussed. And it was one that I just needed, sometimes when we watch so many movies, you need a little nudge, like put this one to the top of the line. And your book was that for Love and Basketball for me, which I ended up, really adoring. So,
Yeah, I love
hopefully
that
other
film.
readers will have experiences like that, picking up your book and like, okay, I got to check this one out.
Not only that, not only did I watch Love and Basketball for the same reason and really like Love and Basketball, but in my sport and film class last semester, one of the 2 essay topics I gave late in the semester was a comparison of A League of Their Own and Love and Basketball.
Nice.
And I wanted the students to examine the final choices that the characters make
Nice.
in those movies. So that paid off for me. Your book and prodding me to finally see that film paid
That's
off
great.
in an academic setting.
For readers who love a little bit of guidance, on the back of the book, there's actually a checklist, and so you can
Yes.
physically check off the movies as you watch them if you're not a letterboxed person, which I think is
That's a
really
great
fun.
idea.
The designer, her name is Kaylee, and she came up with that. She's like, I love something tactile in a book, and I was like, if you have the budget for it, let's do it. So she's a real genius, I think. And it's been really rewarding to hear stories like that. I've had a few people reach out. Here in Chicago, I played a 35 millimeter print of Bright Star, very selfishly because I never got to see it on the big screen and I wanted to see it. And several hundred people showed up, but we actually sold out. The bookseller did not bring enough books to that screening, which quite felt good. But I've since then had several younger cinephiles. I hate to admit that I am now middle-aged, but I am. And several much younger cinephiles have reached out and said, like, coming to that screening sort of changed their life. Like, that movie changed their life. And I'm like, yes, that movie will change your life. But that was particularly rewarding to hear, that being able to get that programmed, and the Music Box being so gracious in tracking down a 35 millimeter print for me, got like a whole new generation to come to that movie. And I hope the book will do that for several films, whether you get to see it on the big screen or not.
Yeah,
So that
that's
was really
great.
the goal.
All right. Well, I guess we've gathered here to also talk about a new film from a woman director, Wuthering Heights. So let's jump into that. And you know what? Let's talk about adaptations here. I think there's no way around that topic when it comes to a formative novel like Wuthering Heights, which, has been frequently translated to the big screen. It's a classic teen read, but I think it's also a book that people return to throughout their lives, at least judging by my own experience, and honestly by the age range from undergrads to midlifers in the sold out University Town Theater where I saw it. So it is hard to separate book from movie in the case of Wuthering Heights. Emily Bronte's 1847 novel centers on 2 souls who are locked in this lifelong struggle in which friendship, jealousy, rivalry, and romance all merge amidst the moody Yorkshire moors. Writer-director Emerald Fennell, she of Saltburn and Promising Young Woman, is the latest filmmaker to take on the tale with Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi as her Catherine and Heathcliff. Now, despite its literary lineage, I wanted to start our conversation in a way that allows us to talk about this Wuthering Heights both as an adaptation and as its own independent work of art. So, let me propose 2 questions for you both to consider about Fennell's film in relation to the book. What did she do to it? And what did she do with it? So the first question takes the novel into account. It perhaps takes it into account as this standard bearer that the movie has to be measured against. But the second disregards the novel and is only concerned with what's on the screen. Feel free. You guys can answer either question, or if you want to, you can answer both. But I am curious, what does Fennell's Wuthering Heights do to the novel, and what does it do with the novel? Marya, as our guest, do you mind if we start with you?
Yeah. So this was a novel I read, like you said, first when I was 13. I had no guidance. I was just really into like Hawthorne and all kinds of stuff, at reading things I should not have been reading without any help. And so to your answer of what it does to the novel, actually kind of answers both. This answer, I think, will answer both questions with one story. One, I then obviously watched the 1939 version. And when I first saw that movie, I hated it because it butchers the novel, like rips it to pieces, throws out all kinds of characters, makes it a romance. I was like, this is stupid. I was really against it. And then, then I got older and I was like, oh, you know what? This is its own thing. And actually, it's one of the great Hollywood romances. Should Wuthering Heights be one of the great Hollywood romances is a whole other question that you put over to the side, right? but that's really what it does. And I think what this film does is, and I think Fennell has said this in a few of her interviews, trying to like tee people up for what she was doing, is she's trying to capture what it felt like to read the book for the first time. And it sounds to me like she also read it without any guidance, without any analysis of what it's trying to do in terms of race and class and like the inbred sort of disgusting landed gentry versus new money society in England and all of that it does really well. Instead, she captures, for me, what it felt like to read it and be 13 and be like, wow, this is horrible. Because, when I remember reading the book, I don't remember thinking about class or race or anything. I just remember thinking this is violent and strange and a little erotic and I'm confused. And I feel like her movie captures that feeling. Is that the greatest way to adapt a book? I don't know. Like, I can't answer that. Adaptation takes so many different forms. But for me, and I think Fennell and I are the same age, so it feels like I feel like I have a affinity for her films because we're about the same age, because she loved Baz Luhrmann, because she takes Baz Luhrmann kind of style and puts it on everything, which also I don't know if that's, folly or not, but I vibe with it. For me, when I watched this a week and a half ago, I felt like I was 13 again, and I was reading it, and I was romanticizing Heathcliff when I shouldn't have, and I was empathizing with Kathy, even though she's really selfish and makes stupid decisions based on fear as opposed to like thinking it through. So for me, it's a film rooted in feeling, and not just rooted in the feeling of the characters, but the feeling of reading a book that you don't understand. I think it's purposeful that it's not as, to the letter as some of the other adaptations. Although I would argue, I haven't seen as many as Bilge Ebiri, who wrote for Vulture. He watched 32 adaptations.
Wow.
Which is crazy. I have not seen 32 adaptations, but I've seen several. And I do think almost all the ones I've seen did similar changes throughout characters, ended it, halfway through the book.
Sure.
So, I don't know. I guess a lot of the conversation that's happening, I feel, is a little too pedantic in terms of what an adaptation owes to a book. Because quite frankly, to your second question, I don't know how much it owes. I know that I am guilty of sometimes getting mad at an adaptation because it didn't bring what I wanted from a book. And so I understand that reaction. When the Pride and Prejudice came out in 2005, I hated it. I actually haven't rewatched it. I probably should. I probably like it better now than when I was 19 and thought it was a bad adaptation. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And
Yeah.
I'm sure we can dive into some of those thoughts more in detail. But
Yeah.
first, I want to hear what Adam has to say.
She certainly has a more informed answer than me because somehow never assigned. Wuthering Heights, one of those classics I was never assigned, and then Bad English Major, I never sought it out on my own. Now, you may recall, Josh, that Andrea Arnold's film adaptation of Wuthering Heights was
Great
our
film.
2012 Golden Brick winner.
Yeah.
And it beat out, we had different criteria then, but it beat out some pretty formidable movies like Oslo, August 31st from Joachim Trier and Once Upon a Time in Anatolia. So, we really swooned for Wuthering Heights then, though I don't know if we really swooned necessarily over its romanticism. I don't remember. That's the thing. We'll have to go back and I wanted to go back. Yeah, it was harsher.
In my memory,
I think
that's a
part of
harsher
it.
adaptation. Yeah.
Yeah, harsher in terms of certainly how it reflected or how it portrayed the environment and the landscape. Now, one can of worms we could open up, and I can only open it up because I, again, don't know the source material well enough. I know that Andrea Arnold's version didn't change the race of Heathcliff, and knowing the Arnold version, I'm not totally sure I understand why Fennell made the choice that she did.
There's another great article about that. I think it was also Vulture, where it's not actually agreed among literary scholars whether
it's up for scholarly debate for sure.
Was he Black Irish? Was he, I also want to point out, and I feel very strongly this should be pointed out anytime that Arnold version is discussed, the actor that they cast as Heathcliff, his voice was dubbed over. They didn't tell him that. They didn't actually talk about this. It wasn't talked about until he got into legal troubles afterwards. His life was basically ruined by doing this movie because they took him, he was a non-professional
This is
actor.
the adult Mariah? This is the adult Heathcliff?
Yeah, the adult actor.
Okay.
James Howson, isn't that his name?
Yeah, he never did anything else. It was like a traumatic experience for him. So on one hand, like, I'm glad she tried to do what, some scholars say is what Heathcliff was, but at the same time, I don't know that production handled it with care, how they did the casting. They didn't even tell the guy they took his voice away until he saw it publicly, which is really shitty, in my opinion. Really terrible.
Mariah, because I remember, as much as I like the movie, one of my reservations was the performance of the adult Heathcliff. So
yeah,
I didn't know that background.
Yeah, it's something I remember reading when the film came out, and then I, shoved it away because, as you know, we watch a lot of movies, you forget things. And then I looked it up again because I was rewatching bits of it. It's on Criterion Channel, and I wanted to have some counterpoints, with the Fennell and look at other adaptations. And I actually think he gives a great physical performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly wish I would know what his audible performance was, because the physical performance is quite something. And to know all of that, what happened afterwards with the actor and how he's like disappeared, like there's no updates after the legal troubles happened. It's kind of, it's difficult. And then it adds, layers of like, people have been pointing to that film as like a better way to do it. And like, is that a better way to do it if then your manner, sort of ended up not being great for the performer in the film? I don't know. And Arnold doesn't like talking about the film, and I imagine this is probably why.
Yeah,
and
that has to be a major part of it.
And
she's
honestly,
kind of disowned
there's not enough information out there to know, was it her choice to dub him? Was she strong-armed into dubbing him? Like, that would definitely be an interesting, like, if someone can investigate that. But I also don't want to like re-up something that would like hurt that man over again. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So I mean, I guess what I find fascinating about this discussion, not to hijack, is there's so many different interpretations of what Heathcliff could be.
Of course.
And I think if you discuss it and then hold up one film as the best way to do it, you have to look at it holistically, of like, not just what's on film, but this baggage that comes with the film. And I don't think a lot of people are doing that. It feels very bad faith discussion to sort of throw Fennell under the bus, which you can throw her under the bus. That's fine. It's just, if you are going to do that, I feel like you need to have the whole picture.
Yeah. And I don't have that whole picture, though. What I've also heard people suggest, and I think this was certainly part of what I remember from the Arnold version, is regardless of what you say specifically about race and what Heathcliff's race exactly should be depicted as, this sense of Heathcliff as the other.
Yes.
I think that comes through stronger, at least in
I agree with
Arnold's version.
I agree with
whereas
that.
Here, it's just purely, for me, a class distinction. And that maybe isn't quite as strong or as complex as it maybe could be. In terms of this adaptation, question, and I know, Josh, you're at this point really tired of hearing my doctrine, and some listeners probably are too, but it goes to answering my question, or your question, and it's ironic here. I argue, right, that if you're customarily reviewing movies and are thinking of reading the book before seeing the movie, you should see the movie first, because one, you won't be doing the movie the disservice of comparing it the whole time, which is kind of what Mariah said. She's maybe even done before,
I've done
right?
it. I've done it.
You can't help but do it. We're human. We cannot help but do it. And then two, if you really like the movie, or just like the movie, it's quite possible you'll like the book even more, because it will expand the universe. You'll have richer and or more characters, richer and or more world building, etc. The movie by its nature has to contract.
Yeah.
And as a viewer, you're thinking about what's lost, when you could be thinking about reading the book, what's gained. That's my theory.
What's interesting, going off that, one of my favorite movies / books is The English Patient. I watched the movie first, then I read the book, then I read the script. When I was in film school, I did all three. And in the book, Catherine, the character played by Kristen Scott Thomas, she's like a minor character. And in the movie, she's such a big character, she got nominated for Best Actress. So, and I read I think it's in the intro for the script, maybe, like I had the printed book. Anthony Minghella said what he did is he read the book. He was so enamored with it. He immediately got the rights. Then he left the book home, went to the coast, wrote the script based on what he remembered. And so he wanted to make a film based on his impression of reading the book, which
Great.
I
What
think
the
is
book meant
similar
to
to
him.
what
Yeah.
exactly, which I think
I
is
think that's
similar
smart.
to the approach.
I think I'm very pro. Yeah,
Fennell
I'm very
took,
pro
yeah.
that generally. And
Yeah.
sure, there are always going to be exceptions to what I just said. I probably think about, for me, the textbook example would be my favorite movie, maybe, and the first case where I ever did this, which is The World According to Garp. And you take a 2-hour movie and then go to the Irving novel, and of course it's going to expand. So with Wuthering Heights, having not read the book first, I should be blissfully unaware of anything that would be lacking. Yet the whole time I'm watching it, I was distracted, thinking about everything I could only assume the book has to provide, thus offering the more rewarding experience. I was still comparing it to the book, even though I've never seen it. But I just felt like the movie was begging me to compare it to the book. And I actually do really want to read the book now. I guess I'll give Fennell credit for that, but not to expand, but to fill in blanks I feel like I need. And I'll just give you 3 major ones. And it's not really because I was confused in the sense of like I didn't follow it. I mean confused in an engaging and a really rewarding way. The brutality or the bruteness of Heathcliff, the depths of his nefariousness that I don't think Fennell can quite put her finger on, and then accordingly I don't think Elordi can quite portray. I just can only assume that has to be clearer and more complex in the book. The revenge element. Heathcliff vowing to make Kathy suffer for his, in his mind, having to leave Wuthering Heights, that is introduced and then so quickly discarded here. I could be wrong. I just have to imagine is more interesting and deeper in the book. The entirety of the character of Isabella, but specifically her psychology and the nature of the relationship between her and Heathcliff.
I think that has some of the biggest, like, she put her own spin on that.
Yeah,
to be honest there.
I have seen,
I don't know the book will help there.
I have seen on Instagram, I have seen some conflict over this character and what Fennell has done to Isabella. And I know that some argue hers is a feminist story of empowerment, and that Fennell completely defanged her by turning her into this simpering submissive, and others counter that actually she's making her own choices, and this is one of Fennell's more provocative alterations. I don't know about any of that beyond 2 things. Here's the 2 things I'll tell you. I didn't get enough to see her character as anything more than provocation. But Alison Oliver delivers a line reading, and everyone listening to this right now who has seen the movie has to immediately know the line I'm referring to, that I'll argue actually is the most provocative moment the film has to offer, in terms of it being a line and being a moment that knocks me as a viewer, knocked me completely off my bearings, because it simultaneously seemed wrong on every human level imaginable, but also kind of erotic. And I don't think the movie, for all it pretends to be, has nearly enough of those kinds of moments.
Well, I would say I feel like Isabella, at the quote turn that happens, I think she lays it out really well. It starts with her misinterpretation of Romeo and Juliet. She then literally dresses Kathy up like she's a doll. She literally makes a doll. She like tortures the doll. I feel like the evolution of her is really well laid out. I saw some of the takes where they said they felt like it wasn't. I disagreed. I felt like that of all the characters and all their motivations, that one, the line is the clearest for me, I think.
Okay. Well, I would, for Isabella, who, we should note, very small presence in the novel. So it is interesting that she's expanded to the degree she is here. But yet at the same time, she represents to me the not inexplicable, but unfathomable madness that is maybe the quality of the novel, where it's not illogical, but it's just unfathomable. Like how is this person thinking this way and making the decisions they are? Again, in the novel, it never strikes you as illogical. It's just like, this is a mind that has suffered a lot of abuse.
Yeah.
maybe is dealing with a level of mental illness. And this can apply to multiple characters in Wuthering Heights, by the way.
Yeah.
And I do think this vision of Isabella captures that maybe better, to your point, Adam, than like this Heathcliff might. I would say, you know, if I were to go back and answer those two questions I posed, first of all, Mariah, I had a very similar thought to you, is that I think this is not a movie about what Wuthering Heights really is. It may be a movie about what we thought Wuthering Heights was when we read it as teenagers.
Yeah,
Because
I truly think that's what she's
definitely
trying to do.
has, and I think you mentioned more being maybe confused and needed some guidance, but it's not ridiculous that teenagers can read that book and find it romantic. I don't think that's the point of the book, but I think it's in there. I think
Yeah.
Bronte laces it with that. This is part of the confusion, is why this shouldn't be romantic, but I'm finding it romantic. That's part of what makes it such, a book that people return to because they can't wrap their minds around it. And so I don't want to hold that against a movie that is leaning into the romanticism to a degree. So I would say, what did she do to the book? Yes. I think she softened it. I think she romanticized it. And this is despite all the S&M, because I'm sorry, that's not as disturbing as what Bronte conceived in the novel. But I think the romanticism, Adam, does flatten, to your concerns, some things that you noticed just as a narrative. And then for me, what did she do with it? Here's what I think we've got here. I think we've got a pseudo period, softcore romantic tragedy. And you know what? That's an intriguing enough of an experiment for me that I think it's a movie that is worth considering, maybe even aside from its connections to the original novel. I think it's, is this Fennell offering something? It's frustrating because for me, she's still not a vital filmmaker 3 films in, but a continually interesting one, which is not a backhanded compliment. I mean, she's trying different things in different ways and providing different perspectives on material that's familiar that she skews in her own way.
I also do think, to sort of what she brings from the novel, I don't know if that's quite the question, but one layer that I really enjoyed from it that I haven't seen a lot of discussion on is that there are, in my opinion, some layers of the classism, and specifically the even though she doesn't get into the second half of the book, specifically the way that both forms of being rich in this period in England are diseased, in that if you're a landed gentry, he holds on to that with such a tight grip, even though he's like not really tending to his land, that it is this fallow, horrible, rocky, like everyone's miserable and there's blood everywhere, right? And then the new money guy who made his money in velvet, meaning he made his money in enslaved labor, his entire house is like a big version of the dollhouse, but within it there's like all the human reminders of the human toil that brought him that, the hands on the fireplace, the skin room, like all of those things are visual representations of the themes of upper crust England being a rotten, horrible place that makes people rotten, horrible people. I just think she does it, instead of through dialogue or through action, she does it through the world that she's built. And I find that really fascinating. It was really effective for me because the two contrasts seem like contrasts, but they're not really contrasts. They're just different forms of rot.
I'm glad you made that connection, Mariah, with the production design, because the hands from the fireplace, the mantle leading all the way up and proceeding onto the ceiling, I think is one of the more striking visuals in the film. And yeah, the bedroom wall that seems to be made of flesh.
So gross.
I was also thinking, though, a lot of this struck me as, 90s era Tim Burton production design, which, I'm partial to, but it seemed a little here hit or miss or random. Like, why do part of Wuthering Heights look like this old ramshackle falling apart estate, and then other parts look like, Bo Welch put it together for Sleepy Hollow? And there was an inconsistency there to me, but you're drawing a thread that's allowing me to see some ideas behind some of those production design choices, because this is a movie that's throwing its production design in your face. It's throwing its costumes in your face. It wants to be anachronistic, blaringly so. We have the Charlie XCX songs, and some of that I found more successful than others. I mean, Fennell, if nothing else, she's striking me as a very eagerly outrageous director, which, as I said before, is to her credit in some ways. And in some ways it's like, okay, you don't have to try this hard to get me.
I think through all three of her films, you can really see that her like root filmmaker is Baz Luhrmann, for better or for worse. Like that is her, and like his films are similarly like hollow pop, quote, hollow pop interpretations of in two cases, great America or great, literature, Great Gatsby and Romeo and Juliet. And does he take everything from those things? No. Does he take what he thinks is interesting? Yes. Are they probably made for teenagers? I think so. One of the, I don't want to call it a failing because all critical discourse is important, but one of the things that I think people generally don't give her credit for is that she's making these films specifically aimed at that sort of teenage pop sensibility. And that's not to say that there aren't teenagers who like are into lit theory and are like looking for a perfect adaptation with all of the themes. But I would say your average teenager is not, or they're not there yet, or they're on their way there. And maybe this leads them there. Like, I don't know how many people in 1996 went to see Romeo and Juliet because they read it in 9th grade, English. They went because they wanted to see Leo looking hot. You know what I mean? And he nailed it. Right. So, but maybe they watched it and went, I should read this. And it added something. I don't know.
So here's the question, though, about her movies. Like we've talked about, you read Wuthering Heights as a teenager, you're confused, but kind of excited by it.
Yeah.
You read it in your 20s or 30s and you're like, oh, this is way weirder and messed
really
up than I
dark.
ever thought. Are we going to, are the teenagers who are watching this film now going to revisit it in
That's a good
10,
question.
15 years? Or will they, at that point, will it seem kind of thin to them?
Yeah, I guess the question here really is, and it's the same question you could give to Frankenstein, right? Is are people reading in general? Because,
Don't go dark on
literacy,
me,
especially
Mariah.
in the United States, literacy rates are so low.
Mm-hmm.
You basically read what you're forced to read in high school, and if you're not a lit major in college, most American adults read maybe one book a year.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is kind of almost a moot point in that no one's reading anything. Like they're not reading The People We Meet on Vacation either, just because they watched that movie. So I guess it's like a layer of, could it maybe, that more likely this will get people to read Wuthering Heights than if they didn't see the movie because they're not reading it regardless.
That's fair.
Is that the best logic? No, it's kind of bleak, but it's, I think, where we're at.
The audience, maybe this will go there a little bit.
Yeah.
And Josh, back to you as well on, I want to say the production design, the boldness of some of those choices, that's the reason to see the movie. And I, for the most part, went with the musical elements, the score and the song choices. I liked the needle drops that we get here, but the moment, for example, when Kathy goes to find Heathcliff when he's returned and she knows he's at Wuthering Heights and she's looking for him and it's too foggy to find him. Yeah. And then she turns away.
The swoon shot.
So the camera's looking over her shoulder and he emerges out of the fog. That's an incredible moment. Credit to Emerald Fennell and to Linus Sandgren, the cinematographer, for giving us a shot like that. And you mentioned the walls that she is put in a room where, if you just think about the ingenuity of that, she's put in a room where the design of the walls are the color of her skin, with to the moles, the freckles or whatever, so that it's as if she truly blends in with her surroundings, removing all sense of her identity completely. And so that then we get a moment where we actually have those shots near the end with leeches, and they're not only on her body, but on her body on the wall.
Yeah.
That is some beautiful and troubling, imagery. And that's something I really respect that this movie gives us. And you were mentioning too, the lack of consistency, which I like in terms of some of the visual choices. You're right. We'll get moments that feel like they're completely out of a Tim Burton movie, sometimes the more fantastical ones, where all of a sudden we've got that bright red, demonic red background where there's nothing about verisimilitude, right? It could be taken out of a graphic novel all of a sudden, and it's reflecting more of a psychological reality than any kind of actual reality.
Are you talking
right?
about the scene where the sky is red?
The sky's red, those moments, yeah.
So I think, and now I don't know her relationship to this movie, but I think that's an homage to when Rhett shows up in Gone with the Wind. It's almost exactly the same Red. He's on a horse. He saves her, right? And I have the exact same relationship to Gone with the Wind that I have to Wuthering Heights. I watched Gone with the Wind when I was 6. Did I know anything about slavery at that point in my life? No, I did not. Did I know that this book and this movie were romanticizing antebellum South in a way that's actually kind of disturbing? No, I did not. Did I know that Rhett Butler, forcing Scarlett to sleep with him was actually spousal rape? No, I did not. Did I find Rhett Butler incredibly hot and want to think about him? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And was he in my head when I was reading the Byronic novels and the Bronte things and thinking the exact same thing? Yes. And so part of me wonders if she's evoking some of these imageries specifically to remind us that when we're young, we're stupid and we romanticize abuse. I don't actually think she's trying to romanticize abuse. I think she's trying to remind us that abuse can seem romantic, especially when we're young. I don't know if that lands. I don't know if that's a folly to
you're onto
try.
something, Mariah. Yeah.
Sure.
But I
and
think
an
that's
homage
what
like
she's
that.
evoking.
An homage like that could be absolutely what she's going for.
That's
red
what I
is
felt
also
when I saw it,
red is
yeah.
also a striking color that is employed quite a bit throughout
Yeah.
the film
Yeah.
in many scenes. But here's where I am at least going to go, and I'm going to go there partly because it gets back to what you're saying, specifically about audiences and being a certain age when you're considering this material, and if that's the endeavor here, if that's the project, okay?
Yeah.
And there's nothing more subjective than what I'm about to articulate, but then again, everything we're doing here is subjective, okay?
Yeah.
Josh, if this whole project is about trying to heighten how romantic it is, then my question is, why isn't it more romantic? I think this is a profoundly unsexy movie, and I think it wants to be. It seems to want to push buttons. It wants to be transgressive. It wants to be deviantly sexy at times, and I just the whole time I was wondering, how can a movie that seems to want so badly to titillate and to arouse be as tame as this movie is? I don't think there's heat between Kathy and Heathcliff. Those glances when he's working in the stable before they become lovers. I don't think that when they become lovers, now there's one moment, I'll give you the one moment that's genuinely hot in this film. But when they become lovers, the most vanilla love scenes you could imagine, I would argue. And the scene that I would say has to do the most heavy lifting on this front, or maybe I'll say harness the most, especially because it comes so early in the film and it should tell us something about her, Kathy's sexual awakening as a character, is the scene where she is acting as a voyeur, where she is watching and listening to two characters in the barn, engaging in, as you said, in S&M. But in this moment, it's not just her watching or listening. She's also got Heathcliff on top of her from behind, holding her mouth shut. And there are so many layers to this that I think could feel, to a viewer, could make you feel uncomfortable in the best way. Uncomfortable in the way you want to feel uncomfortable as a viewer in the theater in this moment. Tantalizing, teasing, taunting, everything Kathy is feeling in that moment. And I can remember exactly how that scene is shot and edited in my mind, and it seems so everything the opposite of what I just described. And maybe, Mariah, maybe your explanation is the best one, which is that even though this is an R-rated movie, not a PG-13 movie, which would better explain it to me, maybe this is entry-level S&M.
So, okay, I have two counters. Counter one, I think that you could interpret that scene as what it's like to read a book when you're 13 and you're viewing sex and sexuality through a lens and through a very small keyhole, and you still don't understand it, which is kind of how Kathy is learning about sex herself, right? So then if you follow that through, and you could choose to interpret it this way, you don't have to, then the sex scenes aren't all that sexy because it's, again, what you picture at 13. Like what I pictured sex was when I was 13, and what it turned out to be did not align at all.
But there should be something that feels wrong about it.
But it was closer to what she pictures. Like those imageries of like being in a carriage, being in the grass, like that's what you picture when you're 13 and you've read nothing but like Hawthorne and
that's true.
And
yes,
Bronte,
that's true.
And you don't actually like I'm from the generation where if I wanted to watch porn, I would have to like find a VHS of it, right? This younger generation, so I don't know if it works with the younger generation because they've had access to like porn and quote what sex looks like a lot more than millennials did. But I do think that she makes films from a millennial perspective.
Okay.
And
I do just want to clarify, when I say sexy, I mean more in this case what I was saying about being uncomfortable.
No, I get that.
When you're that age, when you take in things that you're not ready to take in, it makes you feel naughty, and that naughtiness, right, makes you feel different things, right? Yeah. And that sometimes can verge on sexiness, even though it's not what we would think of now as perhaps sexy.
The other counter I wanted to make is I do think, and perhaps this is a short girl thing, Admiral Fennell is also short, I'm putting this out there, this scene where, she's thinking about it and she's watching the dough and then she goes and she masturbates and then he follows her and then he stands and his head is over her head. It's the best use of Jacob Elordi's height as an erotic image that I've ever seen. One of the best uses of a man's height as an erotic image that I've ever seen. And then he like picks her up by her corsets, which I don't think you could do. Yeah, that
picking her up with one hand by the waist
sequence
is incredible.
So incredible. And it really uses his height as like the tall, dark, handsome, exactly what everyone pictures. But I think specifically what short girls tend to picture.
Are you guys telling me Jacob Elordi is tall? I didn't get that sense at all from this movie. That's fascinating. So I can offer to this, is it sexy or not question.
I know you're joking, but I truly think she likes filming with him because she's a short girl. And to short girls, there's nothing sexier than a 6'4" guy. Short girls who like men.
I will take your word for it.
It really
Mariah.
is.
I'm not going to debate you on that. I can offer some research from my theater viewing to the sexy question. And it's another scene involving Elordi. All I can tell you is small theater we were at. I think it only has like maybe 60, maybe 75 seats. I think I was one of, before the lights went down, maybe 5 men.
Wow.
The scene with Isabella and Heathcliff, where he's, I guess, proposing, and he repeats, "Do you want me to stop?" I don't know if I've been in a quieter theater after a hushed intake of breath in quite a long time. So just throwing that into our, how sexy is this movie evidence.
Not involving Kathy and Heathcliff. Notably.
It's a fascinating scene because I think it's definitely
speaks,
like
to Mariah's point about your experience of this this whole story, which is heated and confusing and not right in many ways. I mean, one of the more disturbing things is the way it does make sexuality violent and violence sexual. And this isn't the first time a Fennell movie has done this.
Yeah.
So that's definitely at play here as well.
And that scene, I think what's so unnerving, especially for modern audiences about that scene, is he's technically asking for her consent. right? And we're
Yes,
not 100
that's
instead
the
of being
thing.
a rapist or whatever. He is
Right.
he is like over and over asking for her consent, and it's not 100% clear. I think Fennell and Oliver leave room for ambiguity as to whether
Mhm.
she really is
I agree.
consenting or if
Yeah.
she's just like, sure, like, because his height is, again, that's where his height is then subverted because it's no longer sexy and now a little bit threatening. It's interesting.
I mean, it
I
goes
think
back to
like
my theory. I think the Isabella and Heathcliff relationship is more evocative of what the book is about
Yeah.
than the Catherine Heathcliff.
I liked that you said that because one of the threads that the film kind of drops, because almost every film drops the second half of the book, is sort of the inherited trauma, right? But
It excises a whole generation.
Yeah, where I think she brings that in, she folds it in just a little here is the way that she presents their childhoods, where Heathcliff is presented to Kathy as a pet, right? And Isabella, in the book, she's his sister, but here she's Edgar's ward. And
Right.
in a sense, she is kept as a pet pampered, and then is presented Kathy as her own sort of pet. Or as a doll, really, because she's dressing her. So it's not quite the same compounded generational rot that the novel does, but I do think that's a reflection of those themes done folded into the first half. I think Fennell is absolutely trying to get as much of that second half in there as she can while still ending it with the climactic scene that almost every movie ends with.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's
a
reflection of possibly what Emerald Fennell was going for with this film, that we have a range of reactions to this movie here amongst our panel.
I do think, I can't remember which one of you said it, that she's an interesting filmmaker. Is that what you said, Josh? Was it you?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been I haven't been bowled over by anything she's done, but I'm continually intrigued.
I think her strongest suit is that she throws everything, all her ideas, she just throws them all out there. Does it all work? I don't know. But I think there's value in a filmmaker who, one, is getting people to see her films. Like Saltburn, normies were talking about Saltburn. I remember I went to a film festival. It was Refocus. I was at Refocus when that
In
came
Iowa
out.
City.
And I was shopping at one of the little shops. And someone asked why I was in town. I said I was here for the festival. And they were like, oh, I saw a movie I really liked, and I don't really watch many movies. And it was Saltburn. And that was not the movie I was expecting this person to mention. So I think there's some things to be said for a filmmaker who, one, gets people to just actually discuss film instead of come and go, and two, gets average people a little excited. I think there's value in that, especially in an ecosystem where films are treated like commodities and not like art that's worth discussing.
Wuthering Heights is currently out in wide release. People are seeing it. People are discussing it. If you see it and would like to discuss it with us, agree, disagree with any of our takes, we would love to hear from you. Feedback at filmspotting.net. We thank Marya for her candor, for her insights.
Thanks,
as
Marya.
always. It was fun, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Adam, our Filmspotting family members are the ones who keep this show going. So we want to give thanks to a couple of them here really quickly. Thank you to Family Plus member Ryan Saylor from Bakersfield, California, and family member Ava Isabel in Puerto Rico for supporting the show. Ryan shared this with us. I've listened for a number of years now. At the time, I was looking for a film podcast, and someone on Reddit said you guys were the best. So I tuned in for an end of the year episode, and the rest is history. We also heard this from Ava. Been listening to you guys for about 10 years. Started during the Boyhood versus Birdman award battle. So is that back when we were pairing Oscar nominees against each other, Adam?
I think she just means more in the larger discourse. I don't know that we really battled about it, though. I think you were more pro Birdman than Boyhood.
I'm not.
I decidedly
actually
was not.
That's
Okay.
why I was curious. I'm pro on both, to be sure, but I think, have rated Boyhood higher. So
okay. I think Birdman brought a knife to that gunfight, but we will move on. Ava's favorite show segment, the top 5. How about this? Sam must be so happy. The top 5 back-to-back movies we did, Josh. 2015, episode 559. So best director back-to-back movies. Coppola, Nolan, Spielberg, Ridley Scott, Tarantino. No, I can't think of any off the top of my head that would have made that list. But yeah, that's what we were doing. Just any two movies back to back from any filmmaker.
Any two back to back. So is Sam's note here asking us, would we add anyone now?
Oh, gosh, no.
I mean, it's got to be Gerwig, right? In terms of back to back.
Okay, thank you. You're right.
She's kind
thank
of
you for actually doing the
back.
thinking. Lady Bird, then Little Women. That's my number one.
And then Barbie for me. I mean, it's like, yeah, so not bad at all.
Okay. Not bad. You're right. Ryan says the anniversary revisit of Taxi Driver somehow gave me even more to appreciate about one of the greatest and most prescient films ever made. So Ryan's thinking of the 7 from 76 review we did, episode 816.
We also like to ask our new family members for a movie that they credit with making them a cinephile. Ava said Inglourious Bastards, and Ryan said, it's my all-time favorite for a reason. I saw the expectations versus reality sequence from 500 Days of Summer as a budding cinephile in high school and immediately blossomed.
Okay. Thank you, Ava and Ryan, for being family members and for all of those years of listening. You can follow Ava on Letterboxd at Ava is Afraid, and Ryan is at Ryan Loves Film. In addition to keeping us doing what we're doing, membership does come with perks. You get to listen early and ad-free. You get our weekly newsletter. You get exclusive opportunities like being part of the Filmspotting Family Discord, and you get monthly bonus shows. Just before we sat down to record this very episode, we taped a segment with producer Sam, February's bonus episode, Blind Spotting. We do that every February and August. We're making this a habit, apparently, for the second Blind Spotting in a row. We talked about a Kurosawa film that none of us have seen, Drunken Angel. Turned out to be a pretty good conversation. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, I don't think any family members are going to complain that they get more Kurosawa talk. So that was a good one.
More information about joining the Filmspotting family is available at filmspottingfamily.com. And of course, if you'd like to rate or review us, we love getting positive ratings and reviews. You can do that at Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It was just about a year ago exactly, Josh, that we got word about Gene Hackman passing away, and now another titan, one of the greats, Robert Duvall. Hackman, he was born in January 1930 in San Bernardino, California. A year later, January 1931, Duvall was born just about 2 hours south in San Diego. They both passed away at 95.
Yeah, and for those who might be curious, Sam did a little research on this. Apparently, they only appeared in 2 films together. So The Conversation, Duvall uncredited there. And then, I don't think any of us would have guessed this, in 1993's Geronimo, an American Legend. That one directed by Walter Hill, and yeah, both Hackman and Duvall in it.
How about that auspicious start to Duvall's career? 1962, To Kill a Mockingbird. Yes, he was Boo Radley. That was his first film appearance, a 7-time Oscar nominee, won for Best Actor in 84 for Tender Mercies. And we probably remember him best as Tom Hagen in The Godfather, but Kilgore, Colonel Kilgore in Apocalypse Now, Frank Hackett in Network, the great Santini. He is the great Santini. And I've never seen it, but maybe now I'm going to have to correct that, Josh. Gus McCrae in Lonesome Dove on TV. I know, in addition to Lonesome Dove, I surely do have some Robert Duvall blind spots, and we're going to have to set a date, I'm guessing, and start our homework to prepare for a Robert Duvall top 5.
Absolutely. And, to the Hackman point, we've been doing way too many of these within the last year. For me, the place I got to start is Tender Mercies. Have never seen Tender Mercies.
I haven't either. And about a musician. I love movies about musicians, even though it's not about a real musician still.
I'm sure I have more beyond that, but that's probably where it'd start. So yeah, we will get to that list for sure fairly soon here.
Yeah. The same day we lost Robert Duvall, I was going to say one of the heavyweights, but maybe the heavyweight of documentary filmmaking, Frederick Wiseman. He was 96. So, I mean, both of these men lived very long and very fruitful lives. But Wiseman, someone I discovered early in my film student career, watching High School. in the 1960s, or the film came out in the 1960s. But of course, he made Titicut Follies and Hospital and Welfare and Central Park. And recently, I don't know if I had it in my top 10 or it was an honorable mention, but I'm probably going to butcher the French. But in the 2020s, they made Menu Plaisir Les Trois Gros, which was about a French restaurant. And of course, he's all about showing you how institutions and systems operate. And it seems like it's needed now more than ever, Josh. So it's a big loss.
Oh, yeah. That context, you just threw in there at the end actually is very telling and is why we probably should do a Wiseman marathon. I know we're in the midst of having family members, I believe, vote on our marathon
pretty soon. Yeah.
Options. And we obviously did not throw this in because this news just came out, but I could use a marathon. You sound like you're pretty good on Wiseman. I've only seen one
There's
Wiseman.
so many though. No.
There's so many, but you've seen more than me. I've seen one. I saw In Jackson Heights at the Toronto Film Festival that year.
Really?
And was so, knew of his reputation, but it was one of those cases where you're late to seeing someone with a reputation and yet you are still kind of floored by what I think it made my top 10 that year. So yeah, I don't know that it will happen a marathon, but as many people are probably going to embark on at least seeing one of his films. This has been going around in social media. Do you have, of the ones you've seen, Adam, a starting place you'd recommend?
I mean, it's the place I started, and I would say it still feels like it's essential. It is the one that I feel like film students are most often shown, but it's also early in his career. It feels like Wiseman at a point where he's obviously still figuring it out to some extent as a filmmaker, but he's pushed the medium a little bit past what he was doing with Titicut Follies, and that would be high school. High school's the one I would tell people to definitely start with. Yeah. There's so much though that Wiseman has made and chronicled over his life. I mean, talk about someone who has told the story. Obviously he's told other stories too, but has really, I think, chronicled American life in all its forms through institutions. It's Wiseman.
Yeah, my perception, and again, I've seen probably as much Ken Burns as I've seen Wiseman, but he almost seems like a parallel and maybe a different approach to the American story than what you get in something from Ken Burns.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. So we'll see if we do ever embark on that Wiseman marathon. The only problem with Wiseman films, and this isn't true with movies like High School, but progressively the movies do become considerably longer.
Oh, they're massive. Yeah,
they're massive.
Massive.
You can get 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. So that makes it a little bit prohibitive with our marathons. But you did mention the marathons, and we haven't thrown this out to the family yet. The family is going to get the entire Filmspotting Advisory Board call. They'll hear that audio. So they'll hear us discuss these. They'll get to vote on these. They'll get to deliberate on the options. But we might as well go ahead and throw this out to everybody now. We did narrow it down after that advisory board call, and between the three of us, we narrowed it down to 4 options for our 2026 marathon that we feel really good about, I think, as a group. And based on what I'm seeing in the Discord, our family members also feel really good about. And those 4 options are what we're calling for now the Actresses Studio, effectively method actresses of the 50s and 60s. So films of Joanne Woodward, Marilyn Monroe, Lee Remick, Geraldine Page, think of those performers. Brazilian cinema, which was a recommendation of one of our advisory board members. So much to dig into there over several decades. Josh, why don't you go ahead and say what it is briefly, your top pick of dissident cinema?
Yeah, dissident cinema, just films that are critiquing or pushing back against government abuse, overreach. Other countries around the world have been living with this throughout their history. And in the US, it's been something that certain populations have lived with throughout the United States history, but all of us increasingly are. And so it seemed topical to me to look back at films, not only set in the US. I think it was helpful, Adam, from the Filmspotting Advisory Board. meeting to expand this and say, if you were going to do a marathon like this, let's make it global. And so let's look at, obviously European wrestling with this around the time of World War II. But even speaking to the Brazilian question, South American or perhaps, Korean concerns tackling these issues films. So that's where we'd go with the dissonant cinema option.
Yeah. And the fourth option, post-war Japanese cinema, but beyond Kurosawa and Ozu. And look, we still have Ozu and Kurosawa blind spots, but we have seen a fair number of films by those masters. How do we get outside that realm a little bit? We watched a Mizoguchi film as part of a recent marathon, Sancho the Bailiff, and we both loved it. But Yugetsu is an all-timer, or regarded as an all-timer. That would be part of this marathon, maybe even the first film in the marathon. Floating Clouds by Nuruse, Kinoshita, Kobayashi, Tesho Gahara, some of these other very well-known, very highly regarded Japanese filmmakers, but not the ones who usually get mentioned first or second. That's who we'd be covering.
Yeah, it's a great bunch. And again, just a reminder, Filmspotting family members get to vote and actually determine where we land. So if you're not a member of the family, filmspottingfamily.com, sign up and get a chance to be a part of decisions like this.
Next week here on Filmspotting, something we haven't had on the show in a while, and it's not for a lack of opportunity or really a lack of interest. It's really just a lack of time, and I finally had the time. We're going to share my conversation with documentary director Morgan Neville, really one of our most well-known documentarians. Won't You Be My Neighbor was the Mr. Rogers documentary from 2008, 20 Feet from Stardom. 2013 was the Oscar winner. The Anthony Bourdain documentary, Roadrunner, from 2021. I spoke to him about his new film, Paul McCartney, Man on the Run. And I was interested in talking to Neville because we're interested in documentary as a form. We're interested in musicians, but also we're very interested in Paul McCartney. Turns out, after interviewing him, we're also interested in the bass as an instrument. We both play. So we had a lot in common. We had a really fun conversation. I wish we had a chance actually to talk a little bit longer, but you'll hear that conversation where we'll dig into his movie, which, as you may have gleaned from the title, Man on the Run, it's a look just at that period right after the Beatles split up until John Lennon's death, where he made solo albums, created Wings, and put out all of those albums, and also, of course, married Linda McCartney and started a family, and it's a lot that the movie chronicles. So look forward to that next week on the show, my conversation with him. We will also have our top 5 Catherine O'Hara characters. Speaking of, again, great performers who have recently passed away, unfortunately, but we will have some fun paying tribute to her next week.
Absolutely. If you want to keep up with all our future episodes, you can find those listed at filmspotting.net. Adam, last call. I want to give out a last call because a Copenhagen meetup is probably going to happen. I've heard from 3 listeners who are interested.
Yeah, I was going to say at least 3 emails.
It's great. 3 emails, and they'll tell me how to say if it is a Copenhagen. I'm going to say it's Hagen, probably.
Okay. You like to say Hagen. I say Hagen, tomato.
We'll get that verified by the listeners. We're circling right now. Haven't heard back from all 3 of them. Saturday, March 7th. So if this is the first you're hearing of it and you are in the area, go ahead and send an email to feedback@filmspotting.net or find me on social, Larson on Film, Larson with an E. All right, Adam, next picture show. How about this? We touched briefly on the Romeo and Juliet references in the new Wuthering Heights. Well, our sister podcast, The Next Picture Show, looking at cinema's present via its past, they were way ahead of us. They are right now having part 1 of their pop classics pairing, and they're talking about Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet from 1996. Mariah Gates brought that up, and Luhrmann's influence on Emerald Fennell as well. And then, of course, after that, their next episode, the following episode, they will get to Wuthering Heights itself. New episodes of The Next Picture Show drop every Tuesday, and you can find them wherever you get your podcasts.
It is time for poll results. A couple of weeks ago, in anticipation of our 30th anniversary review of Trainspotting, we asked you, we thought it was a simple question. Choose life. Choose a 90s movie soundtrack. The options were Clueless, Dazed and Confused, The Crow, Pulp Fiction, Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, there it is again, Reality Bites, Singles, Trainspotting, or you could go other and write it in. And I don't want to spoil the results here, Josh, but other did better than it usually does in these polls.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And understandably. I mean, as we discussed when we first laid out this poll, so many options and so many personal experiences of the soundtracks of this time. Speaking of which, I'm going to read the results, Adam, and express, how I feel about them based on whether I own the CD. So,
okay.
Last place, Reality Bites, 3%. Hurts. I had Reality Bites, listened to it quite a bit. Clueless, 4%. Didn't have that one, so fine. Singles, 9%. Didn't have that either. The Crow, didn't have that. Loved hearing producer Sam's affection for the Crow soundtrack, 10%. Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, also at 10%, so a tie there. Dazed and Confused, 12%. That whole bunch I did not own, so that's fine that they're at the end here. Other did place with 13%, and here are some of the write-ins. Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown, Rushmore, Judgment Night, Crooklyn, Empire Records, Until the End of the World, Natural Born Killers, Mallrats, Sleepless in Seattle, Lost Highway, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Pump Up the Volume, Grosse Point Blank, and 10 Things I Hate About You. I think this is Sam's note here, given the plethora of other write-ins. How did no one write in So I Married an Axe Murderer? Can you name a band,
answer.
Adam, on the So I Married an Axe Murderer soundtrack?
No, I cannot. Sorry.
Elastica?
Didn't own it.
Is
Maybe.
that a band? Is that?
Yeah, it definitely
I think
is.
that was a 90s band, right? Okay. All right. So let's get to the top here where things were pretty tight. In second place, 16% of the vote was Trainspotting, but that meant Pulp Fiction won this poll with 24% of the vote.
That feels right. It feels right that those two were at the top, and to have all those options and for Pulp Fiction to take a quarter of the votes, that's pretty impressive. And we're going to share Troy Taylor here. This is a response that Sam actually shared in the Filmspotting newsletter a little while back. It's a good one. For people alive during the 90s, our choice is going to be heavily influenced by the soundtrack we happened to choose in the CD store with our limited music funds. You might have wanted to listen to all these soundtracks, but you couldn't buy them all. So whichever one you settled on will be the one you listen to, which will make it the one you're most attached to. For me, that would be Romeo and Juliet. All these soundtrack choices are solid, but this is the soundtrack I bought. So when it comes on, I'm whisked back to days driving in my black 95 Monte Carlo with friends as an immortal young adult, and that's what makes it the superior soundtrack.
Substitute an 89 Honda Accord that I bought from my parents, Troy, and you're speaking my language.
Not all of us had a black Monte Carlo.
Yeah, really. But I did have, you hit the button and the headlights like popped up,
Ooh.
Pretty cool.
Okay.
Scott G weighed in. Of course, any young movie buff in the 90s had to have that Pulp Fiction CD. Yeah, it's true, Scott. But us truly cool cinema fans were already on board with Tarantino's song selection skills because we'd been playing the Reservoir Dogs soundtrack on repeat for the previous 2 years, not to mention watching the VHS of the movie itself at least once per week. I love Scott pulling in the, just waiting in the background while everyone talks about how much they like this album and then jumping in like, well, have you heard their first album?
You know what, though? He's right. I like and liked Reservoir Dogs, that soundtrack better. I liked it better than Pulp Fiction. I swear to God, I listened to it way more often than Pulp Fiction. Little Green Bag, off the jump.
Look at this
Green
guy.
Bag.
Look at this guy.
You got Magic Carpet Ride, Fool for Love, Stuck in the Middle with You, Harvest Moon.
Wow.
You've got Coconut. Come on. Harry Nilsson's Coconut at the end.
That's all great, Adam, but have you ever listened to the soundtrack for Tarantino's short film he made that was never distributed? That
I don't believe
is
you.
the best soundtrack of all time.
I don't believe you.
So,
Well, Jefferson's going to one-up everybody, even you. Pulp Fiction isn't the best Tarantino soundtrack of the decade. It's the Jackie Brown soundtrack. I still own it on tape, even though I no longer own a tape deck.
Considering Jackie Brown is the best Tarantino film, I think Jefferson is onto something.
Okay.
Here's Nicole Novak going with Trainspotting because it was the film that made me a cinephile and the soundtrack made me a lover of Britpop. I saw the movie with a group of friends and half of us exited the theater with our minds blown, me and the other half wondering what they had just sat through. I immediately went out and bought the soundtrack on CD. It's a no skips, iconic collection of music that to this day immediately transports me back to the exact spot in the movie where it's played. Choose life, choose Trainspotting. And I think Nicole has really nailed something with the no skips idea. I mean, if you get a soundtrack that's no skips, that's top notch. It's kind of like, I remember when we used to buy CDs, back to Troy's point about spending your money, because like it was this, you just had to make an actual purchase. You couldn't stream it. And I remember thinking, if I get 5 songs I love on this album, that was a good investment.
I think that's the right number. You're right.
Yeah. You get a no skips, you're doing great.
Yeah, that's primo. You're right. Sean Muldoon is going to expand on Nicole's thoughts. Look, guys, you often joke about the deeply flawed polls, but this might be your most flawed one yet, not because the options are bad or you're missing a clear winner, but because Trainspotting is so far and away the only right winner. Trainspotting is the one movie on this list where the film felt like it was the defining document of a cultural and musical moment. As Britpop took over the UK, everyone abroad was trying to find a way to capitalize on it, whether it was the reemergence of Bond with Goldeneye, or Tony Blair's New Labour, or the commercialized version of Britpop via the Spice Girls. Danny Boyle was the one filmmaker who understood the working class backgrounds and themes of artists like Pulp and Oasis, that captured the kind of hedonistic attitude of those bands, that understood the musical influences on the movement that was happening, Bowie, New Order, and found the perfect novel to adapt for that moment. Plus, name any of those movies listed that have a scene so singularly built around its music as Trainspotting's opening of Lust for Life or closing of Born Slippy. Like, come on, guys. What are we doing here? And what's funny here is I could give him one for sure. And you know what it is? It's Stuck in the Middle with You from Reservoir Dogs.
I suppose. I think Sean has a very strong thesis there. Here's Jonathan Anderson in Denver. As far as licensed needle drop soundtrack albums, there is no better than The Crow. Oh, Sam support here. Thank you. I will not be accepting questions at this time.
Okay.
Jim McMahon. I went with Singles in this flawed poll, with the flawed reasoning that it's very much of its early 90s era as opposed to a crate dive. I got it a month before I went off to college and proudly tacked the long box up on my wall, which now feels like the most on-the-nose early 90s thing I could have done. Oh my gosh. Jim.
Mm-hmm. You're having flashbacks?
I'm having intense flashbacks of... Which year was it? Yeah, sophomore year college. The entire wall against my bed was just cut out long box covers taped as wallpaper.
Okay.
I'd forgotten that, Jim.
Singles,
Thanks.
I think I said this when we announced this poll. Singles and Pulp Fiction, I think, are the only 2 on this list that I owned. So I love the Singles love. Patrick says, I chose Romeo and Juliet because of how well the music works within the movie. I don't know if I've ever listened to it on my own, but to hear Garbage's Number One Crush, the Cardigans' Love Fool, and Desiree's Kissing You within the movie was and is sublime. Baz can be a lot for me. With this one, his best. I never tire of it.
Here's Julio Oliveira. I hate that my beloved Reality Bites is getting slaughtered. Yeah, I know, Julio. Come on, My Sharona and Lisa Loeb's Stay in one disc. I also owned, probably still own, Pulp Fiction, Clueless, and Trainspotting, but none of them got as much play as the Reality Bites disc.
A few more here. They're all so good. Peter Ralston in Brisbane, Australia. I was in the supermarket when I heard there would be a poll on 90s movie soundtracks and did my best not to punch the air. I thought I was alone in my appreciation of 90s soundtracks. They outnumber all other decade soundtracks combined at our house. The soundtrack I voted for was the CD I played so much I wore it out. Until the End of the World.
Yes.
It's the one that would always prompt someone to stop the conversation abruptly and ask, what are we listening to? This is great. So great it was the music they would play for years at the Warana Cinema up in Townsville in that cool red velvet curtain space before the movie came on. Sweet Oblivion from start to finish. And Josh, you're so cool because I know you love this one. And this is a Wim Wenders movie. Not only have I not heard the soundtrack, I've never seen the movie.
I mean, it's just, yeah, I listed when we first talked about this poll, like Depeche Mode, REM, Talking Heads, Lou Reed, and The Mood. It's like all the songs, you know, you can get these soundtracks where they're going in different places, each song, right? Capturing different scenes. To me, when I think of Until the End of the World, it's just this sort of apocalyptic mood that every song captures in its own way from iconic artists. So
okay,
hard to argue with that.
Good stuff.
All right, where are we at here? We were
Darren.
Yes, just bombarded with feedback. Darren, let's go to Darren. Natural Born Killers is the first title that comes to mind when I think of 90s soundtracks. Not only did it bring Patti Smith, Leonard Cohen, and Nine Inch Nails into my 17-year-old tastes, it also managed to have Patsy Cline, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and Jane's Addiction somehow make sense within a 10-minute span. So many of these 90s soundtracks, yes, I owned every single one of those listed here, incorporated dialogue from the movie. But I can't hear the Cowboy Junkies' Sweet Jane without also hearing Woody Harrelson's Mickey announce the whole world's coming to an end, Mal. And You Belong to Me may be one of my favorite Bob Dylan songs, even though I'm pretty sure I've only heard it with Mickey and Mallory talking through it. I forgot about that detail. Yeah, the dialogue thing.
Yeah. The last two here. Michael, the Empire Records soundtrack is so great it couldn't be contained on the official soundtrack release. So I burned a CD with over a dozen songs in the movie that weren't included on the official soundtrack. It's also an album that reflects the diversity of music tastes of the characters. Ethan Embry's Mark, for instance, is more into punk and thrash metal, so you get an eclectic mix. You've got the Gin Blossoms, the Cranberries, Toad the Wet Sprocket, Gwar, Coyote Shivers, and of course, the fictional Rex Manning. It's full of bangers.
Oh, man. Gin Blossoms. Wow. Okay, last comment. Maxwell Fletcher. I just had to throw a vote in for the underseen Spike Lee gem, Crooklyn. The semi-autobiographical movie centers on growing up in 1970s Brooklyn, and the double disc soundtrack is absolutely overflowing with some of the best R&B from that time. The staple singers, Stevie Wonder, the Stylistics, James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, the JBs. The list just keeps going. I was probably 11 or 12 when I saw the movie, and the nonstop bangers hooked me immediately. It doesn't hurt that this coming-of-age movie is vibrant, sweet, tender, and I think it's one of Spike's best. I'm probably the only one with this write-in, but perhaps it will prompt a few folks out there to seek it out. If nothing else, your ears will thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Maxwell. I think that might be the one I'm going to next after this, actually.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm glad to be reminded of how good that is as well. We thank everyone who voted and who left a comment. Sorry if we didn't get to you. It is time for a new poll, though it's not really a new poll. I think we started this maybe last year, maybe even the year before. It's a ballot. We're looking for your official Academy of Filmspotting listeners' Best Picture ballot. Our Oscar special is coming up. So you've got 10 nominees, and your job is to make sure that you've watched them all and then rank them. Rather than just giving you a poll where you can only select one option, we're giving you a survey where you can drag and rank them. Tell us the order. Submit your ballot.
Look at that technology. So
All
that's the Academy of Filmspotting listeners' Best Picture. That's the AFLBB.
Yes.
Right?
Let's
Okay,
go
we'll
with that. Officially. We're not going to list them all. You know them or can look them up in 2 weeks on our Oscar special. We'll probably share our picks when we get to Best Picture, our exact order, but we'll talk about who will win, more importantly, who should win, who should have been nominated. Michael Phillips, he typically joins us. I guess I should harass him about that and make sure that he's available.
Yeah.
Haven't done
Track
that yet.
man down. Come on.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet. You can submit your ballot and leave a comment at filmspotting.net. Results and your feedback on that show in a couple of weeks. The Pantheon Project officially commences. Last week, me, you, producer Sam nominated 9 films for the Filmspotting Pantheon. 6 of them have been reviewed, have been discussed in depth by you and me on the show. The Battle of Algiers, Harlan County, USA, The Best Years of Our Lives, Cleo from 5 to 7, Stop Making Sense, and Abbas Kiarostami's Close Up. It's a good list. To be eligible, there are 3 others that still need reviews. Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon, it was part of a marathon, but you weren't part of that marathon, Josh. That was a long time ago. Kelly Reichardt's Meek's Cutoff, reviewed here on this show, but also before your time. And now the film we're about to talk about, your wild card choice, Josh, a movie, John Ford's How Green Was My Valley from 1941, that not only has never been reviewed in any form here on the show, a movie that I've never seen until now.
I just wanted to do you a favor, Adam. I wanted to give you an excuse to knock out a blind spot, a John Ford blind spot, no less. So this film is set in a coal mining community in rural Wales at the turn of the 20th century. It won 5 Oscars, including Ford's second consecutive for Best Director. He had won for The Grapes of Wrath a year earlier. So yeah, I think we have to start with your first impressions, Adam. And I don't know, maybe some good context is just what your understanding or perception of the movie was before watching it, and then what you made of the actual film itself.
Well, I don't know at what point it exactly was, but I certainly, in more recent years, came to recognize that it was a film that is widely admired. But prior to that, it was kind of a punchline, or that's how I thought of it, right? Citizen Kane got beat by How Green Was My Valley. The name even is part of it. The name sounds so quaint, right? Yeah. And so unassuming. If the Academy was going to screw up, if the Academy was going to get something that monumentally wrong, it would be for a movie or over a movie called How Green Was My Valley.
Just really wrong.
Right. Just so misguided. Well, you know what? It isn't Citizen Kane, but it doesn't matter because it's still a pretty great film.
Yes.
That I'm really grateful I saw. And I hate to pile on the movie we talked about originally here, but I'm watching this back to back with Wuthering Heights. And I'm thinking about it in relation to that film because they're both based on novels. They're both really tied to place. They're intimate in that way, yet quite large in scale when you consider the number of characters and all the story elements, everything that happens to all these characters, the complexity of what has to be conveyed about these people and their relationships and their needs and their desires. And one of those films, I came away starving for more. And the other one, this one, my plate somehow was full. What I think Ford and the screenwriter Philip Dunn, this is my best explanation anyway, but the fact is, it's one of those movies that I immediately after watching it felt like I can't wait to watch again. And I know we say that, or you can't say that about any really good film, but it really was one of those cases where I felt like I have to go back and watch it and figure out how they're doing this.
Yeah.
How they're these elements of classical Hollywood filmmaking, but then also the ways that John Ford is applying his own techniques and doing things very different than a lot of classical Hollywood filmmakers would do. How is he pulling off everything I just described? The complexity of all that and making it look easy. But for me, what I'm going to argue anyway is that what I think he and the screenwriter here, Philip Dunn, understood adapting the material, what I think the director of photography here, because he's a key collaborator in this, Arthur Miller is his name. Obviously, Richard Llewellyn must have portrayed this in the novel, is the extent to which life, all of life really, but especially in this village and in small villages like this one, are driven by ritual. Family is ritual. How you get clean after work and prepare for dinner, how you eat dinner. Everyone has a prescribed role and routine. What weekends are like in the Morgan home. Church is ritual. What you get dressed to wear, where you sit, how you pray. Work, of course, at the coal mine is ritual. And even if you're not going to work in the coal mine, if you're one of the wives who stays home, you have your ritual, you have your routine where you put the boots out and the lunch, the breakfast you prepare and the lunch you prepare. But it's all routine, right? Ritual, up the hill, down the mine, up the mine, clock in, clock out, At the end of the week, you get in line, you get paid. You sing songs on the way up the hill. You sing songs down the hill. You sing songs at church. You sing songs at weddings. And what the movie reckons with then, of course, and this goes back to the title and the opening narration, is what happens when those rituals are disrupted and then eventually are discarded forever.
Yeah.
As they have ultimately, inevitably, always are going to be. That loss. And I think it's not just in the material. What I'm arguing, Josh, is that it's not just in the material. Clearly it is. I think it's how acutely Ford shows it, how he draws our attention to it. It's in the deep focus, the use of the depth of field, and the takes aren't exceptionally long. Like, he's not drawing your attention to a bunch of ostentatious takes, right? Or the camera's doing a lot of movement, but the takes are long enough that we sit with these characters, we observe, we see the landscape. Here again, the depth of the landscape around the village itself. I felt like I knew the topography of this entire place.
Yeah.
Like I knew where everyone lived in relation to each other.
Every inch.
Right? The distance between the coal mine and Evor's home and the Morgan home.
Yeah.
I knew the landscape of the Morgan house. And more importantly then, within all of that, it was about watching human behavior, watching the human behavior in all those spaces within all of those rituals. And I think that's what I just kept coming back to and what I kept being so moved by. It was just even like the physicality in the gestures and the repetition of those things and the repetition of certain phrases. It just seemed to so understand and capture the rhythms of life. And it's one of those cases where, and lots of people have said this, and I've said it here on the show too, right? I think it is a universal truth that the more specific something is, the more general it is, the more universal it is. And the more specific this movie is in capturing what life was like at this time for these people in this specific place, the more it felt applicable to me in my own life, even though I can't relate in any direct way to these characters who are working every day in a coal mine. Nevertheless, I felt it. I felt what these characters were going through, and I felt like I could relate to it in my own life.
I think that, your discussion of ritual just opened up for me why I responded to this movie initially, the first time I saw it, maybe, I don't know, 6 years ago now, so deeply as I did, which, I'm going to give the back of my brain a little time to process, and then I'll express, but I want to go in another direction right now because part of that ritual you mentioned was the songs. And that stood out to me the first time. And this time I think by the third time, characters were actively singing in character. These aren't like, we have moments where we hear the characters singing kind of on the soundtrack, right? But there are so many moments where characters on the screen are actively singing, which is part of the ritual you discussed. And by the second or third one on this viewing, Adam, I was like, I'm going to count these because I'm just curious how many we have. And so this ranges from what you said, coming home from the mines, to a wedding where the people are singing at the wedding. That night at the wedding party, the Morgan father doing he's walking the line drunken song, and singing on the way to church. I mean, there's just singing throughout this movie. Just over under guess for me. I'm going to put the over under at 6 songs where characters are actively singing in a scene.
I will go over. That feels like it has to be over.
Yeah. I think if I may have missed 1 or 2, but it was 10 to my count. Yeah. 10 times where this is a central element of a sequence. And I think that speaks to a couple of things. I think it speaks to the ritual aspect, which you astutely pointed out. I think it also speaks to one of the general themes of this movie, which is the individual versus the community. And notice that all of these songs are group songs. There are no solos. So every one of these is the community of some sort singing together. The compositions in this picture and the emphasis on communal composition. So when the mine workers are reading that notice that's posted about their wages being reduced, and it's not just one guy reading it and then turning around and shouting, "Hey, our wages." It's like 40 men, their coal dusted hats in the frame, all looking at the sign, right? And you can have the many times guests come to the Morgan's house. This is the central family. We haven't given much of the plot, but it basically centers around one family in this town of, I don't know, maybe 6 brothers. I think it might be, and 1 sister. And it's through the perspective of the youngest brother, Hugh. All the times that people gather in their home. And then, of course, the church scenes, congregants at church. There was a striking moment on this view, Adam, that was a contrast to this, all these communal shots. And remember when the brothers, this is talk of a union forming, and the father of this family is against it because he's a traditionalist. Many reasons he doesn't approve of this. The sons, the grown sons, are all in favor, and they have a dinner argument over the dinner table, and the sons stand up and one by one leave. And there is a single shot of the father, Morgan, by himself. And then we cut to a shot of all alone Hugh, the youngest son, who's our perspective. And the father says to him, "Yes, my son, I know you are there." And just that emphasizes that the importance of community, because the father wants to desperately hold on to the one person who is still with him. Individualism, even to the father in holding his perspective, is not as valuable as communal agreement is. And ritual is a part of that. As you said, ritual holds that together. And I think, Adam, as you know, why should this movie affect me so much? It's in another country, in another time. From the research I've done, it may not even be that accurate to what it was like to mine in a Welsh village at that time, right? The author apparently did not come from that background, and
sure,
you know, this is what I'm finding.
Totally romanticized, yeah.
Romanticized. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I come from a family who, for 3 generations, had the same rituals tied to these things. And my generation is when that has been broken. And it's been broken for reasons, a whole bunch of reasons I don't need to get into. They're not all negative reasons. They're good reasons. They're necessary reasons. They're practical reasons. They're cultural reasons. They're political reasons. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to draw a stark line. Yes. I'm not saying it didn't need to happen, but it happened. And so I look back at a movie like this and it's like, wow, this is the sort of stuff that's been lost. Now, I will also say what I like about this movie is it's not purely nostalgic. It's not just glamorizing that. It is also recognizing the difficulties, the losses that happen within those rituals. So to go back to your early response about your perception of this movie, you can see why it was considered corny, and some elements might be corny. It's very sincere, but I don't think it's naive.
No,
I think it's also a very wide-eyed movie about the losses that come even to a community that tries to stay together through ritual. So I think it's pretty sophisticated on that front.
I agree, because it understands that it can't hold, It's impossible, that no matter how hard you try, that it will fade, that these rituals and that the family unit will eventually have to disband. The things you cling to as the touchstones of your youth will fade. And in that way, I don't think it is naive. And Josh, I'll say too, to your point, even, you know, I'll just say this generally, because I think I can say it somewhat from my own experience, but also other families that I know. Even if you're someone who has overall, if you think back on your childhood and you don't necessarily think about it like it was all sunshine and roses maybe the family was mostly dysfunctional. It wasn't, let's just say it wasn't the Morgan household for the most part, right?
Right.
Where, everybody seems to have gotten along with each other great. And there's just pure love. And for the most part, it seems bliss in this home. When those people, when you get together, what are the things you reminisce about and what do you talk about and think about fondly? You think about the rituals. You think about dinners. You think about the Saturday mornings. You think about the things that you remember that we did as a unit that were always the same.
Yeah.
That were consistent, right? Remember when Dad always did this.
Yeah,
Remember when Sheila, whoever, always would do this, right? Those are the things you remember. Those are the things you think about. I think it's really poignant in this movie. For example, there are 2 points where two of the older brothers, the two oldest in the family, who, to your point earlier, are at odds with their father. And they, at these 2 moments, say to their dad, and one time he obliges and one time he doesn't. But they say to him, Dad, would you read us a verse from the Bible? And they don't, I think it's pretty clear at this point, like, they're not believers. One of them's definitely not a believer. We know that for sure, based on something he said earlier in the movie. They're not even believers. It's not because they want to be comforted by the word of God in that moment. They want to be comforted by their father.
The ritual.
They want to be comforted by the ritual of their dad getting the book out and reading to them. That's what's important to them in that moment.
And it's an offering to him, right? It's a peace offering to him.
That's it. You're right. Right. So you're right. The ritual matters to them even more, maybe to the parents, right? In that instance, especially at the end of the film. But to go to your point too about singing, right? So then you think about not only the consistency of ritual and routine, but then how important, how striking in this film are then the discrepancies or the deviations from it.
Yes.
The moment when there should be singing and there isn't. When Anharid gets married.
Yes.
When Anharid gets married and she walks out of the church and nobody is singing. And the father has to say to Daibando and all the men standing outside who would normally be rejoicing and all be in unison singing, greeting them as they come out of the church. He has to say to him something like, what, you can't greet my daughter with a song? My daughter's wedding doesn't deserve a song. And it isn't explicitly
but it's very
stated.
Reluctant. Like, it's very somber.
It is, right? And it isn't explicitly stated, but I think it's pretty clear that a couple things. One, I think they have a general idea that Anharid, based on her demeanor and her overall appearance, this isn't a marriage of love. That this doesn't seem like Ivor and Bronwyn's wedding. This doesn't seem like a marriage where they are actually in love with each other. Even though Ivor seems like a bit of a I don't know, maybe not the most exciting man. They are in love with each other.
We should say, just for plot, for those who haven't seen it, she's marrying the coal miner's owner, the coal mine owner's son. So basically up in class. In class.
So that's the thing. Part of it is, I think they have picked up on the fact that even Anharid's not happy, but beyond that, and more significantly, that she's marrying up in class, that there is a distrust, right? And a mistrust generally around the land, the coal mine's owner, and then appropriately his son as well. And so they're not singing. So when there are deviations from the ritual, that also has a power. But Ford's camera, he captures that. The screenplay captures that, makes note of that. We then as viewers are drawn to that. And it again has a real power. And I don't want to keep, this is the last time I'll do it. I don't want to keep killing Wuthering Heights, but which movie felt to me more appropriate as a Valentine's Day watch? I have to be honest. I know that there's romance in Wuthering Heights that is, obviously the romance is more requited than it is here. But Josh, I'm just telling you, point blank, I am not exaggerating when I say that I think there's more romantic tension and more heat in any one of Maureen O'Hara's stolen glances at Walter Pidgeon, the reverend in town, than there is between Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi at any point in Wuthering Heights.
The hot reverend.
He is. They're yearning for each other, Josh. It is so chaste and so sexy. And part of it is, again, how the camera works too. When they get really close to each other, and then how the camera backs away and sometimes and shows us how it gives, sort of a room for them to be near each other, and maybe even shows a little bit of reverence for them in that moment. It's probably so sexy though, because it's so chaste. Like, I don't think there's ever really a doubt with these characters that discretion and duty will rule the day.
Sure.
And that just made me want them to be together even more. It honestly, parts of them looking at each other, that took my breath away.
Yeah, O'Hara and Pigeon are so good in this, and it's the in the mood for love principle, right?
It is.
It's the reticence, which we didn't get into this in Wuthering Heights, and honestly, like that, it's hard to really compare these two films, but
it is.
The whole Catherine Heathcliff get it on montage, which is entirely imposed on, doesn't happen in the book, let's just say, but even independent of that, is yes, like not a lot of heat. But here I agree with you, partly in the performance, partly in the filmmaking. In terms of Enhart and O'Hara's character, and that scene you were talking about where they're not singing, or they're reluctantly singing after her wedding. We've been talking a lot about thematic and resonance in this movie, but in terms of the visuals, the sequence, the shot I think of is when she's walking out of the church with her new husband that she and everyone else in the village disapproves of. And her wedding veil is literally trying to escape. Like the wind, it's this long veil is like pulling it off her head. And it's, the way I read it is like, if you're not going to get out of this marriage, I am.
Right.
And just that visual touch. I mean, this movie is gorgeous. We have to say. And I was trying to figure out, I wish I ran out of time to do more research. How did Ford get these shots of, as you said, topographically, we know where everything is, but we even have a sense beyond it, of the hills beyond this village. And I did find that this came from an article on the TCM website by Frank Miller, that basically there was a plot near Malibu that they turned into many acres into this Welsh mining village. Okay. So it's all in California. They chose to shot in black and white because if they'd done color, it would not have matched the lushness of the greenery of Wales. What I couldn't find is, I don't think there are matte paintings involved for those backdrops. But I couldn't find how they got in this location that depth of what is beyond this village. It doesn't have the claustrophobia and the quaintness. Maybe this is why it resonates universally, is because this is a film that it takes a place entirely, except for maybe the scenes where young Hugh goes off to school to another town. Otherwise, entirely in this village. But we do still have a sense of the wider world beyond. And maybe how they're contained within it,
Yes.
And just pictorially, I don't know how they managed to do that, but it's just a gorgeous picture.
No, it is. And there are so many moments that we could just say, let's look at this and try to decipher or diagram exactly how they did it. Maybe the shot, Josh, that I remember most, though, that I want to go back and really break down. How about the church sequence with the deacons when they cast out the woman who's gotten pregnant and had a baby out of wedlock? The way Ford shoots that scene when that woman gets called up, he's using a little bit of a high angle, and so the diagonal provides this like steepness and severity to it. And you're already in church, and then there's shadows, and the way everyone in church is facing her, and she already seems so small. Then the perspective, right? There's like a focal length in the perspective of her having to walk towards the deacons. The use of shadows there, everything. It's harrowing. It's harrowing, and it's just a shot. I don't think the camera moves, but it's just all in the framing and the lighting. And there's so many moments like that. And, Greg Toland, everybody thinks of Toland and Citizen Kane, and rightfully so. But just like with Kane, there are a bunch of ceiling shots in this movie too. Yeah, that's true. Kind of famously with Kane, but it's here constantly. The Morgan house, right? Like emphasizing the structure, emphasizing the foundation of it all, like the authenticity of it all, that this isn't a set, that this shouldn't feel like a set, that this should feel like this real place existing in this real place. And it's convincing. However they did it, it's convincing.
Yeah. And that church sequence with the woman who is shamed, there's also an incredible insert close-up of one of the deacons' fingers actively pointing. And I don't know if we get hardly any close-ups or insert shots in this movie. It's mostly, as I said, communal group shots or even more expansive of the scenery. So that jumps out at you. And that whole sequence too, I think, this movie is probably regarded as, maybe pious in some sense, but it's actually pretty sophisticated in its treatment of religious life. I would agree, exposing it as incredibly hypocritical in that sequence. And at the same time, it has room for it to be foundational in positive ways for some of the characters. So, how about, where else are you going to get a theological debate about unions? we have like I think it's another deacon who says unions are the work of the devil. And then you have Pigeon's pastor basically blessing their union, but saying, it's not whether or not unions are right. It's how do you conduct your union? That's right. Are you going to do it justly? Well, are you still looking out for your fellow man and those in need? And exactly. So, and then, oh my gosh, in terms of imagery, I don't want to spoil this because there may be people who hopefully are listening to this and encouraged to check How Green Was My Valley out. But two sequences, let's say, where the elevator going down to the mines rises up to the ground level. And in both cases, we're worrying about someone who's been injured or possibly killed. And in both of those instances are evocations of the Pietà image, Mary holding Jesus' body. And even though it's used twice, I feel like it's not overdone because it's so beautifully composed. And in each instance, I think as well, composed in a way that is specific to the characters who are in the composition. So again, I'm treading around spoilers, but the way characters are positioned matters because of who the character is and their relationships to each other. Those are just beautiful visual, but also thematically evocative moments in the movie. Yeah.
Those are the kind of choices you see throughout the entire film. They all matter. This is why this movie is still significant and still absolutely worth seeing. And we've talked about a few of the performances. I don't know that I have qualms with anybody's performance here. I certainly think that Pigeon's very good, and Maureen O'Hara is kind of a revelation. And I love watching the Morgan patriarch and matriarch here, played by Donald Crisp. And I want to make sure Sarah Allgood is as Beth Morgan.
So good together.
They are so good together, right? Again, there's a comfort that immediately makes you believe them as the head of this family, right?
They've been together for decades.
100 years. They've been together since the beginning of time, Josh. Since Adam and Eve, they've been together. And that said, it was one of those cases where I'm looking at the young Hugh Morgan here, and I'm going, man, this kid looks so familiar. I know this face. Of course I know this face, but I don't know how I know him. And so at one point I had to get my phone out. It was bugging me too much. And I Googled the cast. And of course it's Roddy McDowall. Yeah. And you watch his performance as Hugh Morgan. And I only know Roddy McDowall from a few a few performances, a few of his famous performances here and there. I don't really have an opinion of him as an actor. You watch him here as Hugh Morgan and you go, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I understand why he was a child star who became an actor, right?
Sure.
Who became a major player for, I don't know what period of time, but you understand it. You see the talent in his performance.
And well,
He's
he has to
very
carry
good.
a lot. He has to carry a lot because
Yes.
this character this goes back to what I was saying about it being nostalgic, but not naive, is in this face that we see a lot of, because he's watching the adults and he's watching the change, and in voiceover commenting on it, but not all that much. But this movie is also about growing up and into an awareness of the brokenness of the world. And you see that awareness dawn on Roddy McDowall's face as these scenes continue. So yeah, I think I agree with you. All the performances are strong and would definitely include his.
Great start to our Pantheon project, How Green Was My Valley, available VOD on most platforms. In 2 weeks, we'll get to Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon. That one is available on HBO Max, the Criterion channel, and a few free ad-supported streamers, also VOD. So you have lots of options if you have not seen that film, Rashomon, and even if you have, probably worth taking another look at. Maybe it's changed. Who knows? For more on the Pantheon, visit filmspotting.net/Pantheon. Josh, that is our show.
If you would like to connect with us on social media, you can find Adam and the show on Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and YouTube. He's at Filmspotting. I'm at all those places as well. You can find me at Larson on Film. We are independently produced and listener supported. You can support the show by joining the Filmspotting family. And you can do that at filmspottingfamily.com. Listen early and ad-free. You'll also get a weekly newsletter, monthly bonus episodes, and access to the entire show archive. For show t-shirts and other merch, go to filmspotting.net/shop.
In the Filmspotting archive, I don't recommend, I don't know why we're saying this, because I don't recommend anybody go back and listen to these, but we do have conversations, myself and Filmspotting producer, co-founder Sam Van Hallgren, talking about Stagecoach from John Ford, The Searchers, and My Darling Clementine. They were all part of the very first Filmspotting marathon, Westerns, in 2005.
Nice.
A Western a week, Josh. Guess how many we watched? There were eight Westerns part of that marathon.
All right.
Yeah. And I think after that, maybe we started to realize 8 was a little bit too ambitious. But I can say the marathons, the fact that we've now done 50 plus of these, we can attribute it back to really John Ford. Not just Westerns, but John Ford in a lot of ways. Like the fact that we felt so ignorant about Ford as this master and had not seen, actually I had seen Stagecoach in school, but I hadn't seen The Searchers. I hadn't seen My Darling Clementine. And we had to fix that. In limited release, you can see Kokuho, Japan's second highest grossing film of 2025. It's a 3-hour biopic about the master of the art of kabuki. Out wide, been a lot of Baz Luhrmann talk on this show. Epic. This is Elvis Presley in concert. Long lost, newly restored footage of Elvis in concert during his 70s Vegas residency, assembled by Luhrmann, presented in IMAX. You can also see, I know. I mean, I really do want to see it, but I don't know that I'm going to have an IMAX opportunity. Glenn Powell and Margaret Qualley are in How to Make a Killing. This is a remake of 1949's Alec Guinness starring Kind Hearts and Coronets. Now, I didn't know that, but I've seen that film. That was part of another Filmspotting marathon at one point.
And it's pretty good and has me reconsidering my exposure to the trailer of How to Make a Killing.
Right.
Okay.
I know.
Interesting.
Me too. The Andrew Kevin Walker scripted Psycho Killer is also out. Streaming VOD, you can see Morgan Neville's Paul McCartney, Man on the Run. That's on Prime Video. And I would say if you have any interest in it at all, especially if you're a Beatles fan or a Paul McCartney fan specifically, watch it because you can hear my interview with Morgan Neville about that film next week on the show. And we will also pay tribute to Catherine O'Hara with our top 5 Catherine O'Hara characters.
Filmspotting is produced by Golden Joe Dassault and Sam Van Hallgren. Without Sam and Golden Joe, this show wouldn't go. Our production assistant is Sophie Kempenar. Special thanks to everyone at WBEZ Chicago. More information is available at wbez.org. For Filmspotting, I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenar. Thanks for listening.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.